We're so glad you tuned in to another episode of The Catholic View for Women. I'm Teresa Tomeo, along with my wonderful co-host, Elena Rodriguez, who served in many different roles here at the network, a producer for radio and TV, now working in marketing, and also heading up Media Missionaries, and Janet Morana, who co-hosts the Defending Life program. She's also the co-founder of the Silent No More awareness campaign for women, as well as the executive director of Priests for Life. We're talking today about letters from our leaders, encouraging Catholics to listen to the voices of our shepherds. Oftentimes, ladies, we've heard, and we even kind of went through this in our own journeys, thinking that the church isn't doing enough. Father isn't doing enough, the deacon isn't doing enough, sister isn't doing enough, bishop so-and-so isn't doing enough again.
It's kind of, it's never good enough.
Never good enough, and nobody's Catholic enough. Right.
Yeah.
Right. But what we really have to do is look to our leaders and realize that there are an awful lot of things that they have done and are doing, especially in terms of writing some fantastic documents, even recently.
Right. And especially, in the pro-life movement, we hear a lot of complaining about the bishops. So why aren't they standing up enough? Why aren't they speaking enough for life? And, I think you have to have a challenge out there for everybody. Every diocese has a website. And my first question is, if you're going to complain, have you gone to your own diocesan website and seen the resources that are up there? Because every time a bishop does make any kind of a statement, the diocese always puts it on their website. So, I think that's a real challenge, because I guarantee you, most people watching this program right now have not looked at their own diocese website.
And how many of them have also seen what their bishop has written lately, even in a column or maybe a letter, right?
Yeah.
Right. And some of the columns, I love going to the website of my archdiocese there, Archdiocese of Detroit, because they've been doing teaching on Unleash the Gospel, which is a great pastoral letter that we've been talking about in this year's season, the 9th season of The Catholic View. And I also am a huge fan of Archbishop Aquila, who's got a document that we're going to talk about. And of course, one of my heroes, and yours too, I know, is Archbishop Chaput. His columns are amazing. And he's not even my bishop. I mean, Archbishop Vigneron is my shepherd in Detroit. But these are all men of God who are really trying to teach us, and we need to encourage them and see what they have to say.
So I thought it'd be great now for the show. Let's just unpack some of these great statements.
Okay.
I'd like to start here. Here's one. And this comes called The Statement on the Dignity of Human Life from the Bishops of New Mexico. So the Bishops of New Mexico, there's several of them, got together and made this one. It's a long letter, but I'm going to just lift one statement from it. It says, we acknowledge that there are Catholic legislators who advocate and vote for some issues that are of moral importance to Catholics, including concern for poor people and immigrants. We applaud their work giving voices to the voiceless. However, we are concerned by public statements by some legislators that seem to say that a faithful Catholic can support abortion or doctor-assisted suicide. Support for abortion or doctor-assisted suicide is not in accord with the teachings of the Church. These represent the direct taking of human life and are always wrong. Real clear, right? Because very often, and everyone gets upset about these pro-abortion politicians, and some of them Catholics, who make it like it's no big deal. And here are the Bishops of New Mexico, and this came out March 6th of 2017.
So it's very recent.
Very recent. Very recent.
Well, there's also a statement by Bishop Edward Scharfenberger, and he's the Bishop of Albany. And he says the public issue of defunding Planned Parenthood was the subject of demonstrations and counter-demonstrations across the country this past weekend. He's referring to February of 2017. And he says, without question, Planned Parenthood provides some morally unobjectionable health services to women. However, this statement is not unlike saying that a man who beats his wife sometimes gives her flowers. Planned Parenthood is the unquestioned #1 provider of abortions in our country. This is the primary product for which it is known. Abortion is not health care. It is the intentional killing of a unique human person in his or her mother's womb. This is a scientific fact that has nothing at all to do with religion or religious belief. Consistent with this scientific fact, the Catholic Church clearly teaches the objective truth that abortion is a grave moral evil and that material cooperation in abortion is a mortal sin. How
Very clear.
Is this?
Very, very clear. And, again, I think we have to stop, criticizing our shepherds and listen and read and really get it out there. You know, like even on your social media, post some of these on your Facebook and say, did you know, or did you hear, or did you read?
And I think it's very important what you said, Janet, to go to the diocesan, the archdiocesan website where we live and get it straight from the official source, not from something we heard on some secular news outlet, which may be an interpretation of made out of context, but go always to the source. Right. And a great resource to also always go to the source is the National Catholic Register at ncregister.com, covering the news, EWTN News Nightly, Catholic Connection in the news segment at the beginning of the show. Always go to the source. What did the Pope say? Go to the Vatican.va website. Don't get it from somebody else who might mess it up.
The other thing, too, that another great resource that I really like is the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops website, which is usccb.org. For example, during the month of February, when they were honoring marriage, my husband and I do a lot of work in marriage ministry as a deacon couple. They had so many good, not only articles, but videos that they had done all about marriage, leading up to World Marriage Day, which is always this Sunday right before Valentine's Day. How many people go to that website of the bishops and see these great videos that can be shared on your parish website, post on your Facebook page? They have a whole teaching on marriage, what marriage is, how the Supreme Court decision does not change the definition of marriage. And this is another great resource, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, or even when we're looking at issues when it comes to embryonic stem cell research versus other types of stem cell research. That bishop's website is filled with all kinds of information and resources in how to learn about our faith. Right.
And you know, also, too, we have to think of the fact that, you know, we as lay people should be doing something. So just like in government, it's we the people, and in the church is we are the people of God, you know, and the people of life. So we should be doing something.
We're all called to evangelize, and we forget that. And the new evangelization, which is a phrase that was first coined by John Paul II, and now there's a whole pontifical council dedicated to the new evangelization. It means those of us who have already been raised in the faith and evangelized need at some level to be re-evangelized because we haven't been embracing our faith and doing enough with it. So there's this whole movement now within the church called the new evangelization, and much of it, as Vatican II said, is with us, the laity.
And by virtue of our own baptism, we're all missionaries. We're all called to spread the gospel. And not just father or sister or bishop. It's our responsibility as well. So if we think they're not doing enough, that means we're not doing enough as well.
And Janet, you work with one of the busiest priests out there, Father Frank Pavone. And he's our spiritual advisor. And the man never stops, right?
Never stops.
Doing, so you see how busy he is in his work. I married, my Dominic's been a deacon now for over 6 years, and I see how the deacons and the priests are you know, pulled in 16 different directions. So we have a responsibility to learn our faith and to help pass it on along with the bishops and the teachers in the church.
Well, another thing, speaking of Father Frank, he gave a nice recommendation of a scripture quote I'd like to read, and this is where Peter is giving advice to the other bishops and priests, you know, in the early days of the church, and this comes from 1 Peter chapter 5. So I exhort the presbyters among you, as a fellow presbyter and witness to the sufferings of Christ, and one who has a share in the glory to be revealed. Tend the flock of God in your midst, overseeing not by constraint but willingly, as God would have it, not for shameful profit but eagerly. Do not lord it over those assigned to you, but be examples to the flock.
There you go.
Right.
There you go.
Great example from the first Pope, Peter. Right.
I also want to take a minute to mention Father Frank's notes that he gives us for each show, because he reviews each of the shows and gives us his insight and input. He says, very often, both with politicians and with bishops, people sit back and wait for them to do something. It's so true. But our leaders can do their job only if we do ours. And you mentioned this, Janet. It's we the people, and the church is the people of God. In both cases, there is authority and there are leaders, but authority is service, and it's service geared towards helping the people be who they are called to be and do what they're called to do. In the first case, to govern themselves, and in the second case, to carry out their baptismal commitment to spread the gospel. And then you went into the scripture verse that he suggested that we read, which you just did. So again, this is this joint effort between the laity and the religious that have to, you know, make sure that we are listening to our leaders.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand, working together. You know?
And a lot of this work is prayer as well.
Right.
We
Right.
have to
I
begin
mean,
with
that's one of the
prayer.
biggest things. Let's say someone is busy at home with young children. I can't get out. I can't do that much.
Certainly.
You pray. You pray for the church. You pray
Right.
for our deacons and our priests and our leaders. This is an excellent document, too. I also want to talk about. I covered this extensively on my show. It's called Bought with a Price. There's actually another one that came out after this first initial document, this great letter from Reverend Paul Laverde, who was with the Arlington Diocese, but I believe he's retired now. And it's all about pornography and reminding us that we were bought for a price, right? Bought with a price, and that is the life of Jesus on the cross. And he was so moved by the problem that he was seeing in his own diocese in terms of so many men coming into the confessional dealing with pornography addiction.
that's
And
right.
so he's working in these two letters. There's two parts to it. The first one that came out in 2014 and another one that came out, I think, in 16. Those are two portions of it before he retired. All about what is pornography, why it's harmful, what the church says, and what can we do about it. And he draws on folks who've had experience with it, such as Matt Fradd, who's probably one of the most prominent speakers on pornography and its effect on men and on families. But listen to what he says. This is in the preface to this letter. How I wish that this edition of my pastoral letter, Bought with a Price, was unnecessary. How I wish that stories of porn addiction like Matt Fradd's found in a new forward never had to happen. And yet, since I first issued this letter 8 years ago, the porn epidemic engulfing our families, marriages, and communities has reached a pandemic scale. In light of this, I pray that Matt's powerful witness, the addition of a practical takeaway, a study guide for individual groups and families, and a plan of life will be a timely and encouraging tool for purity and holiness of life. So in addition to the original letter, he did a follow-up, and they have a study guide for individual groups, families, and a plan. So how can we say that bishops aren't teaching? There are letters, documents, teachings from our leaders.
I want to mention a quote from the document Splendor of Love by Archbishop Samuel Aquila, who's the Archbishop of Denver. And he says, technology now dominates sexuality and has also damaged the planet. For instance, he says, technology now dominates sexuality and has also damaged the planet. The predominant use of the pill and disrupting chemicals found in plastics and other products have flooded our water supplies with synthetic estrogens and disrupting chemicals that cause a rise in infertility and an increased risk of cancer and hormones. And so we see how even the bishops are concerned, of course, of the human person, but also concerned about the environment.
The environment.
Right.
And,
That's right.
and it's an overall concern for God's creation. The bishops are very active in protecting the faith, in protecting the human person and the whole creation. And we don't know this unless we go, as you said, to the website, unless we study this document.
Unless we make an effort, and that to me is something that I didn't do. And we're not pointing fingers and talking
Right.
down to anyone, because all of us have had our own
I mean-
cases, I like to call it chronic Catholic curmudgeonitis, where we complain too much. I actually have that in my new book, Beyond Sunday. But we really have to make an effort. We can't be expected to be spoon-fed everything. We have to dig. If we're buying a house, right, we research, we look at the neighborhood, we talk to other people, we go
Look
on
at
websites.
see what the schools are.
We see what the schools are. We do
Right.
our homework. Why aren't we willing to do our homework with our faith? And why are we just, and I'm speaking for myself because this is where I was at, because I used to complain a lot, why are we willing just to sit there and point at everybody else and not ourselves? What am I doing
Right.
to support my leaders and to learn about the faith?
Well, I can remember in all the years I was away from the church, I didn't even, if you asked me what diocese are you in, I was like, huh, what? I mean, I grew up in Brooklyn, but I didn't realize it was even a diocese or what the terminology was.
Right.
I mean, back then there wasn't websites, but even when they came into being, when I was away from the church, I didn't care about, I was just, in that crowd of pointing fingers at the church, saying, oh, look at the church, it's oppressive. Look at the church, it's this. Look at the church, it's that. Well, for goodness sakes, I have a lot of time to make up for all the bad things said. But now that I've been back with the church, to me, there's so much out there. I feel there's not enough minutes in the day
to talk about
to
it,
talk
and to
and
share it.
read and to share.
And our
I mean,
mission is to
I can't have
spread
enough
that.
time to go up to all these websites. I mean, I do as much as I can. And I think that's the real challenge, everyone. The minute you're thinking of criticizing the bishops or even the Pope or anybody, Go to the source. Go to those websites. I mean, the Vatican website is spewing with so much of the documents about
especially the Vatican Radio website.
The Vatican
because
Radio
they have
website.
The Pope's messages, his
There's so
Angelus
much up
messages,
there.
audience messages, daily homilies.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, Pope Francis has been misquoted left and right, you know, where they take one little phrase and then they run to the races with what he was really trying to say. How many people have read every document that he has come out with during his papacy? Probably nil to none. So I really think the challenge is for us to do more of our own homework in embracing the good things that both, starting with our pastor has said. I mean, I know a lot of pastors, they do these lovely letters in the church bulletin.
Yeah, my pastor does that too.
Right. Father Frank, when he was at my parents in St. Charles for 5 years, he always had the pastor let him write every week a letter that went inside the bulletin. So are you reading all this stuff other than, you know, other than
we've
criticizing?
gotten into the habit, don't you think, if you don't hear something from the pulpit, then we think that they're not teaching.
It's not existing.
It's not existing, and
Right.
that's just simply not true, because they're taking advantage of all the different media outlets out there, whether it be social media, whether it be issuing, and they issue the letters in writing as well. I mean, in hard copy too, where you can literally get a physical copy of it. But they are doing, I think, a really great job of getting their message out through the social media and through other areas of the internet. Just wrapping up before we take a break, of a funny story about how sometimes lazy we can be and expecting everybody to spoon feed us.
Right.
I had an email from a listener who was having a debate with her sister, who was a fallen away Catholic. And so this woman writes me and she says, here's the question she's asking me. Now you need to give me all the answers and get back with me as soon as possible so I can defend the faith. And I wrote her back and I said, this is your opportunity. I said, everything you've asked me, I've talked about on this show. You can go to the Catholic Answers website, which is one of our shows that we have here every day on EWTN, which is an apologetics website and ministry. I said, you can go to the USCCB. I gave her a few websites. I didn't just ignore her concern for not having information.
Right.
I said, go to these websites and put in these questions, put in these words, and you'll find your answers. I said, but you need to read these to see what the church says so you can embrace it more deeply and you can successfully defend the faith.
And explain it.
She writes me back and she says, I have young children. I don't have time to do any of this. And I wanted to write back, I didn't, but I wanted to always think I'm sitting around eating bonbons and, you know. I mean, it was ridiculous, the fact that I wasn't asking her to write a book. I was just asking her for her own good and for the good of the church to do some research and to get educated on something, because there's so much out there. All right, we are running over, I think. We're going to take a quick break and come back and talk more about letters from our leaders, how we can support our shepherds while at the same time learning more about our faith. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Catholic View for Women. Teresa Tomeo, Elena Rodriguez, and Janet Morana. And this episode, we are talking about how we can support our bishops, letters from our leaders, looking at some of these fantastic documents from our bishops here in the U.S. and actually elsewhere, because we're going to be talking about Humanae Vitae with Pope Paul VI. A lot of times, we don't realize that they're there. We don't bother to look them up. I know that's how I was approaching my faith life. Janet mentioned that as well. But we have this beautiful letter, for example, from Archbishop Aquila in the Archdiocese of Denver. And it's called The Splendor of Love. It came out in 2018, of course, looking at the anniversary of Pope Paul VI's prophetic letter, an encyclical called Humanae Vitae of Human Life. And I want to read something, because this is for me and you as journalists. We both went to journalism school. That's our training. That's our background. And he talks about communicators, artists, journalists, and all those in media. I urge you to use your creative talents and your platform to communicate the beauty of God's vision of marital love. Media in all of its forms continues to increase its influence in forming our culture, and you have the capability to bring the liberating truth about sex and marriage to people who desperately need it. Love that. Love it.
What a great responsibility, but also what a great privilege.
Yeah.
And God will give you the grace.
Yep.
Because you have the #1 product to put out there, if you want to talk about it. It's truth.
Right.
It is truth with capital T.
Yep.
So that's capital with T.
T.
With T.
Truth with T.
Yes.
Right.
That is truth with capital T, and how we have to be faithful to this truth. We have a great responsibility. As we were saying before, we can't put out what we don't have first.
That's right.
So we have to love love the truth first before we put it out.
And we have to know it.
And we have to know it to be able to put it out. And it will come back to us and bless us.
Yeah. Well, also, too, you know, in the Splendor of Love, Archbishop Aquila goes on to, I like paragraph 13, where he says, "We have also seen new and unique challenges arise, of which Blessed Paul VI, which by the time this program is will be St. Paul VI, could not have even dreamed. Rejecting the true nature of the sexual act has not led to increased happiness and fulfillment, but to a distortion of the relationship between men and women. The effects of this sexual revolution have devastated our culture. Large numbers of abortions, a sharp rise in STDs, divorce rates hovering over 50%, birth rates falling below replacement level, and a decline in people getting married.
Wow.
The widespread use of pornography has also trivialized love and made sex cheap, in that it no longer requires a strong and lasting commitment to the other. With the dominance of pornography, we now also see a decline in the rightly ordered sex drive and a loss of libido, and even a movement towards intercourse with robots, as reported in the media."
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Now,
that's a lot.
You can't
he
get any
says
more
there.
direct than that in
No.
terms of what's happening in our culture and how
That's
the
right.
church
He
has
sums
to
it up
respond to it.
very
Yeah.
concise
I
there.
don't know, did we read this quote from, I know you read the quote, the first quote that Father suggested, but the quote from St. Paul in 2 Timothy, did we read that yet?
No.
Because this is really important. I've got it right here.
Okay,
Or do you
go
want to
ahead.
read it,
Yeah, no,
Elena?
go ahead and read it because I just can't find it on my...
Okay, I charge you in the presence of God and of Christ Jesus, who will judge the living and the dead, and by his appearing and his kingly power, to proclaim the word. Be persistent, whether it's convenient or inconvenient. Convince, reprimand, encourage through all patience and teaching. For the time will come when people will not tolerate sound doctrine. Hello? Can you say 2018, 2019, right? The time will come when they will not tolerate sound doctrine, but following their own desires and insatiable curiosity will accumulate teachers and will stop listening to the truth and will be diverted to myths. But you, be self-possessed in all circumstances. Put up with hardship, perform the work of an evangelist, fulfill your ministry. In terms of giving you the letters that we've mentioned, brothers and sisters, we're showing you how our bishops are doing what they can to perform the work of an evangelist and fulfill their ministry and ours as well. Oh my goodness, it's time for homework already. I can't believe it. Wow.
Time for homework. And of course, this will all be on our website. And of course, number one is to read one or more of the letters we've mentioned, which would be The Splendor of Love by Archbishop Sam Aquila from Denver, the Pastoral Letter on Human Dignity and the Sanctity of Life, issued on Ash Wednesday by the Bishops of Alaska. Then we have also Bought with a Price by Bishop Laverty. Number two, share quotes from these letters on your Facebook page and ask your friends what they think. Be prepared to defend your faith. And then, of course, number three, go to your diocesan website and look to see the things your bishop has written. Do this on a regular basis.
Yeah, because a lot of the bishops write columns every month, which
That's
are
right.
great pieces
So
of
this should be
information.
like a monthly activity.
Right.
You know, the first week of every month, go to your diocesan website, see what's
Find out,
happening, see
yeah.
what's going on. Of course, number four, we'd like you to go to our website, thecatholicviewforwomen.com, for more information. We always have the homework up there. We have all the links to these documents for you, and you can sign up for our e-letter. And of course, finally, like us on Facebook. And of course, at the end, I just want to mention the Kitchen Madonna, the Holy Reminders, and she's our patroness for these programs, and she's available at the EWTN Religious Catalog.
Which is another place where you can get a lot of the documents, the hard copy, different documents that are out there, encyclicals, and also
And the books.
just in the books, great resources. All of our
Exactly.
books are on there at the EWTN Religious Catalog.
EWTNRC.com.
There you go. You know it well. It's a
That's
great
right,
link.
Elena. Thank
So
you.
letters from our leaders. There are so many out there. And before we step out and criticize one of our leaders, think about, gosh, has my bishop, has my pastor written something recently that I'm not aware of? Give them a chance. Help them, encourage them. We are all in this together. Thanks so much for watching The Catholic View for Women. For Janet Morana and Elena Rodriguez, I'm Teresa Tomeo, and we'll see you next time, we hope, on The Catholic View for Women.